You're worthless, just like your mother. That's what my stepmom told me before hitting me. After Mom died, Dad married her and life turned cruel. She'd beat me, call me names, and made me feel like nothing. I thought Dad would protect me, but he didn't. He just ignored it all. One night after she threw a plate at me, I decided I couldn't stay. I packed a small bag, waited until they were asleep, and quietly left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to escape. And finally, I was free. The night was dark and cold. I walked down the street, each step taking me further from the hell I'd called home. The weight of my small bag seemed to grow lighter with every block, as if I was shedding years of pain and fear. Soon I found myself standing before a small diner. The neon open sign flickered invitingly, a beacon of hope in my uncertain new world. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. The bell rang as I pushed open the door, and the scent of coffee and bacon surrounded me. An older waitress with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes approached. "What'll it be, hun?" "Just coffee, please," I mumbled, sliding into a booth and wincing as my bruises met the hard seat. She returned with a steaming mug, setting it down gently. Her eyes, wise and weathered, seemed to see right through me. "You sure you're all right, sweetie?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I sipped the bitter coffee, the door chimed again. A man in a worn leather jacket entered, his presence filling the small diner. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee, then turned his gaze to me. "Rough night?" he asked the waitress, his voice carrying a note of concern. "Same as always," she replied. "You know how it is, Joe." There was a weighted pause before Joe called softly. "You all right back there?" I didn't look up. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. To my surprise, Joe and the waitress exchanged a look laden with unspoken understanding. The waitress approached my table again. "Listen, honey," she said gently. "We could use some help around here. If you need a job, we've got one for you." I looked up, shock and hope warring within me. "Really?" Joe nodded, his eyes kind but scrutinizing. "Nothing fancy, just washing dishes and helping out. But it's honest work, and there's a room upstairs you can use." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Weeks passed in a blur of dish soap, coffee refills, and cautious smiles. The diner became my sanctuary and Joe and Martha my guardians. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life here. Then he walked in. Tall, with intense eyes that seemed to hold secrets, he scanned the diner before settling into a booth by the window. I approached, notepad in hand. "Coffee?" He looked up, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition? But that was impossible. I'd never seen him before. "Yes, please," he said, his voice low and smooth. "Black." As I poured his coffee, I could feel his eyes on me, studying, assessing. When I turned to leave, he spoke again. "Thank you, Nora." I froze. "How do you know my name?" A small smile played at his lips. "Your name tag," he said, gesturing to the pin on my uniform. "Oh, right," I laughed nervously, heat rising to my cheeks. "Sorry, I'm not used to wearing it yet." "No problem," he replied. "I'm Justin, by the way." From that day on, Justin became a regular. Every morning, same time, same booth. We'd chat as I refilled his coffee, each conversation feeling like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. He never asked about my past, but somehow I felt he knew more than he let on. One quiet afternoon, as I was wiping down his table, Justin leaned in close. His eyes, usually warm, were intense and urgent. "Nora," he said, his voice low. "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about your mother." My heart stuttered. My mother? But she's... The bell chimed, cutting me off as a group of customers entered. Justin's eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "Later," he mouthed. But later never came. That evening, as I took out the trash, the world exploded into chaos. A van screeched to a halt beside me, rough hands grabbing me before I could scream. As they pulled me towards the vehicle, a familiar voice cut through the night. "Let her go!" I turned to see Justin running towards us, his eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. He moved with inhuman speed and grace, taking down one attacker with a swift blow. But there were too many. As they forced me into the van, our eyes met one last time. "Nora!" Justin shouted, his voice muffled by the closing doors. "I'll find you, I promise." The van sped away, my head spinning from the chloroform they'd used. As consciousness slipped away, one thought echoed in my mind. Justin knew something about my mother. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. I awoke in a room that belonged in a fairy tale, or a nightmare. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating antique furniture and priceless art. Before I could gather my thoughts, the door opened. My father walked in, looking both familiar and like a stranger. "Hello, Nora," he said softly. "Welcome home." The word home hit me like a physical blow. "This isn't home," I spat. "Why am I here? Why did you have me kidnapped? And what does Justin know about Mom?" Surprise flashed across his face at Justin's name. He sighed, sinking into a chair. "It's complicated, Nora. There's so much you don't know, so much I should have told you years ago." "Then tell me now," I demanded, anger and confusion swirling within me. He nodded, his eyes filled with a sadness I'd never seen before. "It all started with your mother," he began. "She wasn't who you think she was, and neither are you." As he spoke, I felt the foundations of my world begin to crumble. The truth, it seemed, was far stranger and more dangerous than I could have ever imagined, and somewhere out there, Justin was looking for me. As my father's revelations unfolded, one question burned in my mind: whose side was Justin really on? The game was just beginning, and I was playing for stakes I didn't yet understand.